The Grandview Country Club's private dining rooms sparkled with the kind of understated elegance that came from decades of hosting the city's most important celebrations. Crystal stemware caught the light from antique chandeliers, while oil portraits of distinguished club members watched over the evening's festivities with quiet approval. Dad's retirement celebration had drawn 40 of his closest colleagues, friends, and family members, all gathered to honor his 35 years as the city's most respected high school principal and his upcoming transition to well-deserved leisure. I sat at the family table in my usual simple black cardigan and modest skirt, quietly observing the carefully orchestrated tribute to Dad's distinguished career in education. He held court in his best suit, accepting congratulations and heartfelt testimonials with the gracious dignity of someone who'd spent decades shaping young minds and building futures. Mom beamed beside him in her elegant dress, occasionally rising to greet former colleagues and parents of students whose lives Dad had touched over the years. My brother Michael commanded attention near the bar, regaling anyone who'd listen with stories from his latest corporate promotion and the new house he'd just purchased in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. His wife Jennifer sparkled beside him in jewelry that probably cost more than most teachers' annual salaries, both of them radiating the confidence that came from climbing the traditional ladder of financial success. My sister Patricia held court near the dessert table with her surgeon husband, both of them discussing their children's acceptance to prestigious private schools and their upcoming European vacation. The conversation flowed effortlessly between career achievements, real estate investments, and educational opportunities, the standard currency of professional families who valued accomplishment above all else. Lisa. Dad's voice carried across the dining room as the main course was cleared. Come over here. I want everyone to hear about our children's success stories. I walked over with my water glass, knowing exactly what was coming. This was Dad's favorite performance at professional gatherings, showcasing his children's achievements as evidence of the strong family values and educational foundation he'd provided. Everyone, Dad announced to the growing circle of educators, school board members, and community leaders, these are my pride and joy. Michael here just made senior vice president at Crawford Industries, youngest person in company history to reach that level. Michael accepted the congratulations with obvious satisfaction, shaking hands and exchanging business cards with appropriate modesty. And Patricia married Dr. Robert Sterling, one of our city's most respected cardiac surgeons. They've built a beautiful life together, 2 children at Riverside Academy, very active in the country club community. Patricia beamed as the circle offered warm congratulations and asked about her charity work and social commitments. And this, Dad's voice took on a different tone as he gestured toward me, is Lisa. Well, she's still finding her way. The circle of accomplished professionals smiled politely, the kind of expressions people wear when they sense a family disappointment story approaching. What do you do, Lisa? Asked Dr. Martinez, the school district's superintendent and one of Dad's longtime colleagues. I work with educational programs, I said simply. She means she's a teacher's aide, Dad clarified with barely concealed disappointment. Part-time work at one of the elementary schools downtown. Nothing like what Michael and Patricia have built, but everyone finds their own level. The circle made understanding sounds, clearly sympathetic to having a family member who hadn't quite achieved the same success as their siblings. Teaching is noble work, offered Mrs. Henderson, wife of the school board president. The education system needs dedicated support staff. Oh, it's noble, Dad agreed, his voice carrying to nearby tables, but let's be realistic about what it represents. While Michael is building corporate empires and Patricia is raising the next generation of leaders, Lisa is, well, she's helping with finger painting and snack time. The laughter that followed was more uncomfortable than cruel, but Dad continued with obvious frustration. The thing is, he said, his educator's voice rising with the authority of someone accustomed to holding audiences, I spent 35 years trying to instill the value of education, the importance of achievement, the necessity of building something meaningful with your life. He gestured around the room full of successful professionals. Look at the people in this room, superintendents, principals, school board members, education leaders who've dedicated their careers to making a difference. These are people who understand what it means to amount to something. More nods of approval from the gathered educators. Michael understood. He took his education seriously, built a career, achieved real success. Patricia understood. She married well, created a stable family, contributes to the community in meaningful ways. The attention of nearby tables had shifted to our conversation, clearly sensing that Dad was building toward some kind of significant point about family values and educational achievement. But Lisa, Dad's voice carried clearly across the dining room now, represents everything I tried to teach my children not to become. 33 years old, living in a tiny apartment, working a part-time job that barely covers basic expenses. No ambition, no drive, no understanding of what success actually requires. The silence that followed was heavy with sympathetic understanding for a father disappointed by a child's limited achievements. "You'll never amount to anything," Dad declared with the finality of an educational professional delivering a performance evaluation. Still working that little job, still pretending that helping with elementary school activities constitutes a meaningful career. The family and assembled guests nodded with benevolent sympathy, clearly moved by Dad's honest assessment of a difficult family situation. I took a sip of water and was quiet for a moment, considering how to respond to being publicly dismissed as a failure at my father's retirement celebration in front of 40 education professionals. Before I could say anything, my phone rang. Loudly. I'd forgotten to switch it to silent mode, and the ringtone echoed across the suddenly quiet dining room. The caller ID showed Mayor's Office, City Hall. "Lisa," Dad said with obvious irritation, "turn that off. This is completely inappropriate during a celebration." But something about the caller made me hesitate. The mayor's office didn't typically call people on Saturday evenings unless something significant had happened. "Answer it," someone from the audience called out with amusement. "Let's see what kind of urgent business the teacher's aide needs to handle." A ripple of good-natured laughter went through the crowd. "Fine," I said and answered the phone on speaker. "Ms. Parker." The professional voice filled the suddenly silent dining room. "Yes, this is Lisa Parker. This is Jennifer Rodriguez from Mayor Thompson's office. The mayor asked me to call personally to thank you for your extraordinary donation to the city's education initiative." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the kitchen staff preparing dessert courses in the adjacent room. The mayor wanted to express his gratitude for the $20 million contribution to modernize our elementary school system. The new technology centers and upgraded facilities will transform education for thousands of children. $20 million. The number seemed to echo in the crystal stemware. Dad's champagne glass was frozen halfway to his lips, his face the color of the white tablecloth. "Ms. Parker," the mayor's assistant continued, "are you there? We'd like to schedule a ceremony to formally recognize the Parker Education Foundation's impact on our community." "I'm here," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the dining room that had gone silent except for the sound of forks being set down on plates. "I'm actually at a family celebration right now." "Oh, wonderful. A celebration of your incredible generosity? That's perfect for our media statement." I looked around the circle of stunned faces, Dad with his mouth hanging open, Michael staring at me like I'd grown a second head, Patricia clutching her husband's arm with obvious shock. "Something like that," I said. "You mentioned the Parker Education Foundation?" "Yes, your foundation's commitment to children's education has been extraordinary. The $20 million for elementary schools, the $15 million for teacher training programs, the $10 million for educational technology. It's the largest private education investment in our city's history. $45 million total." The number hit the room like a physical blow. Dr. Martinez made a small choking sound. "And we understand there's more to come?" the assistant continued. "The proposal for the new Science and Arts Center? That would be another $30 million commitment, correct?" "That's still under review with the foundation board," I said, watching the education professionals around me process numbers that dwarfed their entire district budgets. "Excellent. The mayor wanted me to personally convey that you'll be receiving the city's highest civilian honor at next month's ceremony. Your impact on children's education has been transformational." "I appreciate the recognition," I said. "Can we schedule a formal meeting for Monday to discuss the details?" "Absolutely. One more quick question for tonight's press release. What inspired such a significant commitment to elementary education specifically?" I looked around the circle of educators who had just listened to my father explain why I'd never amount to anything. "I believe that every child deserves access to excellent educational opportunities," I said. Too many people assume that those working in elementary education don't understand the bigger picture of what quality education requires. Beautifully said. That quote will be perfect for tomorrow's announcement. Thank you again, Ms. Parker. I hung up the phone and looked around at the 40 education professionals who had been witness to the most dramatic reversal in Grandview Country Club history. $45 million, Dr. Martinez whispered, staring at me with obvious awe. Lisa, the Parker Education Foundation, that's your foundation? Yes, I said simply. I started it 6 years ago to address funding gaps in elementary education. Your foundation? Dad's voice came out as barely more than a croak. Lisa, what are you talking about? The Parker Education Foundation focuses on early childhood development and elementary education initiatives. We fund technology upgrades, facility improvements, and teacher training programs. Michael found his voice, though it came out about 2 octaves higher than usual. Lisa, where did $45 million come from? Parker Educational Services, I said calmly. The curriculum development company I started 8 years ago. The family stared at me like I'd announced I was from another planet. Curriculum development? Patricia asked weakly. Educational software, digital learning platforms, teacher resources. We design and supply educational materials to school districts nationwide. Dr. Martinez leaned forward with obvious fascination. Parker Educational Services. Lisa, that's your company? You developed the reading comprehension software that's revolutionized primary education. Among other programs, yes. We focus on evidence-based learning tools that actually help children succeed. I know your work, Mrs. Henderson said with amazement. Our district has been using Parker educational materials for 3 years. Test scores have improved across every metric. Dad was staring at me with a combination of shock and what looked like physical nausea. Lisa, how big is Parker Educational Services? Annual revenue is approximately $180 million. We employ 340 people across 15 offices nationwide. The number settled over the dining room like fog rolling in from the ocean. $180 million, Mom whispered, her voice barely audible. The education market has grown significantly over the past decade. Parents and districts are investing heavily in proven learning tools. Michael sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Lisa, you own a $180 million company? Majority shareholder, yes. Though the real measure of success isn't revenue, it's educational impact. Our programs are used by over 2 million children nationwide. Mrs. Henderson was shaking her head with amazement. Lisa, the reading intervention software your company developed has closed achievement gaps that we thought were impossible to address. You've literally changed how children learn to read. That's the point, I said. Educational technology should solve real problems, not just generate profits. The mayor's assistant had mentioned a press release, and I could see several people in the room already pulling out phones, probably to check news websites or social media for information about the Parker Education Foundation. Lisa, Dad said, his voice shaking, why didn't you tell us? All these years we thought. I just said you'd never amount to anything. While standing in a room full of educators whose students benefit from programs I developed, I pointed out. The irony wasn't lost on me. But the teacher's aide job, Mom said with confusion. You said you work at the elementary school. I volunteer 2 days a week in Mrs. Thompson's 3rd grade classroom. I wanted to understand how children actually interact with educational materials before designing better ones. Volunteer work? Patricia asked faintly. The best way to develop effective educational tools is to watch children use them in real classroom settings. Mrs. Thompson's students have been my best focus group for 8 years. Dr. Martinez stood up from his chair, clearly struggling to process the evening's revelations. Lisa, every education professional in this room knows your work. The Parker methodology has become the gold standard for elementary reading instruction. Which is why the foundation focuses on making those tools available to underfunded schools, I explained. Not every district can afford premium educational software. So you give it away? Dad asked, his voice filled with confusion. To schools that meet certain criteria, yes. The foundation covers licensing costs for districts serving high-poverty populations. The servers began bringing out the retirement cake, an elaborate creation celebrating Dad's decades in education. But the usual retirement party energy had been replaced by stunned silence as people processed what they'd just learned. "Lisa," Mom said quietly, "the things we said about your career, your achievements, were said while celebrating in a room full of people who use educational programs I created. I finished. Programs that help thousands of teachers and millions of children every day. I called you a teacher's aide," Dad said, his voice filled with something that sounded like shame. "I said you were helping with finger painting and snack time, while I was actually observing how children develop fine motor skills and social interaction patterns to inform the design of early childhood learning programs." Michael cleared his throat, his business instincts finally kicking in despite the shock. "Lisa, this is incredible. We should discuss family investment opportunities, maybe some strategic partnerships." I laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise everyone at the table. "Michael, Parker Educational Services generates more annual revenue than Crawford Industries. I don't need family investment." "But we're family," Patricia protested. "Family supports each other. We can help with connections, strategic advice. Like you've been supporting me by calling my work meaningless? By treating me like the family disappointment who never learned the value of achievement." The retirement cake was placed in front of Dad, but he was staring at it like he'd forgotten what cake was for. "The foundation ceremony," I said, standing from the table, "is next Saturday if anyone wants to attend. The mayor will be presenting the Education Achievement Award." "Education Achievement Award?" Dr. Martinez asked with obvious excitement. "For contributions to children's education. Apparently helping with finger painting and snack time made a bigger impact than anyone realized." As I walked toward the exit, I could hear the explosion of conversation behind me. Whispered amazement, frantic attempts to process what had just been revealed, probably mixed with calculations about how this changed their understanding of success and achievement. My phone rang again as I reached my car in the country club parking lot. "Lisa." My foundation director's excited voice filled the car as I answered on Bluetooth. "I just heard from the mayor's office. The press conference is scheduled for Monday morning." "Perfect timing," I said, starting the engine. "How did the quarterly numbers look?" "Revenue up 28% year-over-year. The new math program is exceeding adoption projections. We're on track to serve 3 million students by next year." I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, thinking about the conversation that was probably still raging inside the Grandview Country Club's private dining room. Tomorrow, when the newspaper ran their story about the Parker Education Foundation's record-breaking donation, when Dad's education colleagues started asking about his unsuccessful daughter, when they realized that their assumptions about achievement and success had been completely backwards, things would be different. Not because I'd finally proven myself worthy of their respect, but because they'd finally learned the cost of judging someone's worth based on job titles rather than actual impact. Parker Educational Services had bigger innovations in development, and the Parker Education Foundation had more schools to serve. And for the first time in 8 years, I wouldn't have to explain any of it to people who had already decided I wasn't worth listening to. The mayor's ceremony would be held at City Hall, where they'd announce that the woman Dad said would never amount to anything had actually built one of the most impactful education companies in the country while quietly transforming how millions of children learn to read. Some achievements I'd learned speak louder than any celebration dinner ever could.